sincerely thinking about doing a research project, incorporating,
Non-duality?
well, yeah, incorporating the philosophy of non-duality, mindfulness meditation, and long-term space travel. And the reason why long-term space travel is because the psychology part of it, to go into Mars, for example, or even the moon, or just being in the space station for a year. You know, Scott Kelly did that. It has tremendous, it's challenging, right? Especially when you add other people into the mix. And so there's people on the spacecraft or in the habitat. And then if there's also the sense of isolation amongst that because of the distance from Earth, right? Like everyone's loved one, everyone they love is on Earth, including their crewmates, but now they're having to operate in an environment where they don't know if they're going to make it home. Right. It's a small environment. There's radiation, there's group dynamics, there's all these things, and that has a huge psychological toll, as you can imagine. It's you know, it's pretty obvious. So I want to hear, like, for example, I'll say this one last thing to give context. There's a lot of habitats, like in Hawaii near the Mauna Kea Space Observatory. There's one in Utah and Nevada where they have these small, and people go in for a few weeks at a time, basically like a Vipassana retreat. You know, you're locked down. My question, Bob, for you is, like, what would you suggest to either, you know, to me, to start formulating this research? Like, because I want to have a thesis kind of slash, I want to be able to give NASA or whoever, space.com, an essay, submit an essay, like, you know, and maybe I want to participate, because civilians, you don't have to be a scientist or an engineer.
Go to the space station.
To go to these training stations. They call them not astronauts, but there's another name. There's aquanauts, there's astronauts, and then there's yeah.
Cosmonauts is what the Russians call their astronauts, but the real cosmonauts, like we're intronauts.
Right.
Intronauts are exploring inner space.
And then there's psychonauts.
Yeah. Surfing the psyche.
Hold on one second. Let me look it up. I might even remember the name. So there's the Mars Desert Research Station, and they have
I think I've seen footage of that. They found a habitat on Earth that's similar enough to Mars that they're training people to use it.
Yeah, there's different places like Antarctica, the north of Canada. They go up there. Arizona, I'm sure they have something. South America, but there's a name. Let's see. Volunteer research. Oh, here we go. Analogs. Analog not.
Really?
Yeah, so an analog is a simulated environment for, so basically individuals, as long as people are healthy and don't have any major issues and they have a research proposal, they can become analog knots. And an analog knot goes in and you get a crew, 6 to 8 people, I'm not sure how many, and do your research, and you work together and you pretend like you're on Mars in the middle of nowhere. And they simulate everything. So basically, do you have any ideas about that? Because it seems kind of quirky, and for me, not for them, because I'm older, you know. I'm in my late 30s and I was like, what am I doing? but I'm really interested in doing it. So, and I want to connect it to meditation because I think it's powerful.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
a lot of benefit.
that's the key right there. What you're speculating is that the meditational arts, the arts of the intronaut, as it were, are something that ought to be incorporated into the training of a cosmonaut, of an astronaut, for exactly the reason that if you can remain mindful, you're more effective. And if you meditate, you're calmer. And that long, boring stretch of 2 years to get to Mars and 2 years to get back to Earth, we haven't got the cryo systems. So you've got people in a very small space together for 2 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
working on yourself in terms of your reactivity, which is what mindfulness does. We learn not to react, but to respond. When you got a tight group dynamic like that with a whole lot of pressure, it's not unlike a submarine crew, I think.
Yeah. Because they can come up to the surface. They have food and water. They get resupplied easily.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's similar being cooped up for long periods in an artificial environment that way. So certainly any kind of spiritual practice, but especially mindfulness, would be highly useful. And, it should be an integral part of the cosmonaut training. And whether that'll be done, of course, is a different question.
Yeah. It's so like it takes depending on the alignment between Earth and Mars, it takes anywhere between 6 and 9 months to get there. And then they have to wait, I believe, anywhere between 12 and 15 months before the realignment.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's 6 to 9 months back. So, those alignments matter. And, I can imagine just going off imagination that it's probably going to be psychologically harder going there because I think once they land on Mars there'll be a sense of relief, right, and exhilaration,
Like we did it.
yeah, and then they can live together and build a habitat, and then visually they'll have something to look at, like when they're traveling out they won't see anything except
Yeah.
I'm not sure, you know what I mean, like if it's just complete blackness and then the bright light bulb kind of view of a star, or if it's just going to be complete blackness and dots. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the visual has a huge impact on what we can see, right?
Mm-hmm. And mostly they're seeing the inside of the capsule.
Exactly, and it's artificial, like
Right.
electronics.
And when they're on Mars, they're busy. Hugely busy. But when they're on that 6 to 9 month gap, that's where it gets a little bit artificial, whatever they do. And again, for the whole thing, if they have meditational skills, then they're a lot more likely to be calm in the face of boredom. And I don't know what they do on the space station. It must be a very interesting environment.
I'm anticipating, this is just an anticipation, that if I were to, like, say I have the crew and I'm like, we're going to practice 1 hour of meditation in the morning and afternoon, or morning and evening, right, for the research project.
Okay.
I can imagine a lot of people say this is boring. What is the value? How would you articulate the value in that boredom of like just scanning the body or following the breath? Because it's not boring if we're really in the present, right? There's a lot of phenomena.
Yes, but people have to get through that initial phase where, like one of my meditation students said, watching the breath is like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
You know, and to constantly go back to the breath takes work. You know, that notice and return. Notice, oh, my mind has wandered. I'd best go back to the object of meditation, which in this case is the breath.
Yeah.
But like you say, once you get used to it, you know, you get used to the relaxed posture, and you get to a space where the phenomena that arise are not boring anymore. It's still a struggle to get back to the object of meditation,
Yeah.
but the association patterns tend to get even more so. The mind is very tricky. And if you're insisting on meditating, you go back to the meditation object, then the mind's going to find a more interesting distraction for you to follow out the association pattern of. So it's a constant struggle with the mind's clever adaptation to the attempt to meditate, to sabotage it, because the mind does not want to watch itself. So especially at first, it's a real struggle. And then the struggle fades away and you get into a space of the genuine deep calm, which is wonderful, but impermanent like everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I'm also anticipating that anyone, like, I won't go as far as the NASA astronauts, but like say the analog, like this practice simulation, that a lot of the people who will go are used to working with technology and being very active. Maybe a lot of people who want to be astronauts, they know how to fly airplanes, they know how to do scuba diving, work with computers. That's just like a common theme that I see in any kind of aspiring astronaut. And the point I'm making is that's stimulus, right? Being active and learning and working and researching, doing math. And if I, proposing to just follow the breath for an hour can be challenging to people. It's like, oh, well, I'd rather do this. And it's like the thesis is that the meditation practice enhances all those activities because the psychological, the mind and the heart too, right? The emotional body gets clearer. And so that we won't snap on each other if we're stuck in a spacecraft or a simulation spacecraft for 2 weeks or 6 months. There'll be a natural training of like, oh, I know how to breathe. I can check into and it will help everything. But it's like convincing or persuading people of that. Because, I've heard prominent, interviews of people like, oh, I meditate when I write or when I go do this or that. Or it's like, yes, we can meditate. That's a meditation. But to really simplify it and concentrate on one thing to where the mind doesn't want to do it because it's too simple, that's where the magic is, right? That's say or